Hi there, my name's John, and if you found this tutorial, then you probably share my obsession with vintage blow molds and other outdoor Christmas decorating. Now, I have wanted a set of Santa and his reindeer ever since I was a kid and saw them in the Sears catalog. I bought a new house last year, and it has two huge trees in the front yard, so I knew this would be the perfect time to hang a Santa and his reindeer. Now, I set out on my journey to find them. They're getting really hard to find, and they're way more expensive than you want them to be. I got each of my deer and my sleigh from a different vendor. You know, look on eBay, look on Mercari, Facebook Marketplace, I found a bunch. They're all over. You can find them, but they're hard to come by. But if you do find them, buy them because you probably won't see them again. Anyway, when I decided I wanted to hang them, I discovered that there weren't really any tutorials online as to how people are hanging these. I know everyone is different, but I set out on my journey and decided that I was going to film my process, so if anything else, other people could learn from what I learned and at least have a starting place. So I live in Minnesota, and we get lots of snow and cold, obviously, but where I live in particular, we have a lot of wind, so I knew that was going to be an issue with me. The other thing I wanted to do in hanging these is that I wanted to be able to take them down without having to climb up on a ladder with 2 feet of snow on the ground. So the rigging I've designed accomplishes all that. It's a little tricky, and putting it all together takes a long time, but once it's set and done, the following years will be much more simple. So anyway, I hope you like what I have. Again, it may not be for everybody, but this will at least give you a starting off point. I hope you enjoy. Thanks.
Now, it took me one entire year to collect all 9 reindeer. I have the set made by Empire, but there are a few different companies who made these. These are just my favorite. Out of the box, they come designed to perch on a small wire stand on the ground, so to make them fly, you need to make modifications. I was a little nervous about drilling holes into vintage pieces, but once I figured out the best way to hang them, I jumped right in. To figure out where to put the holes, I used this string method. By basing everything off the center seam of the mold and using a string instead of a ruler, you get the holes right where you want them. The most important thing here is that the holes are in the exact same spot on each side, otherwise your pipes aren't going to be level. One of my other hobbies is lamp making, so I decided to use the materials from that world because I'm familiar with the pieces and I knew they would work great in this application. I bought all of my materials from a company called Grand Brass. The descriptions on the screen are the names you can search for on their website, which is grandbrass.com. I started off with a 9-inch by 1/8 IPS threaded zinc-plated steel hollow nipple. I chose this length because it gives the reindeer a wider span, which will help with the balance so they don't twist too much in the wind. Next, I use a 1/8 IPS 3/4 inch diameter threaded knurled flat brass nut. This is all pretty straightforward, just make sure you have even amounts of pipe on either side of the deer. Next, there's a 1/8 IPS brass-plated slip star lock washer. This prevents the nuts from getting loose. Tighten it up with a 1/8 IPS 9/16 inch diameter heavy-duty steel hex head nut. Use a crescent wrench to tighten all these up. Cap off each end with a 1/8 IPS zinc die-cast loop with wire way. This gives you a hole for the guidelines to pass through. If I were to do this over again, I would probably put on another nut and lock washer to hold these on, but I just used some heavy-duty glue to lock these in place, and the guidelines will prevent them from spinning anyway. Once the deer were all finished, it was time for a test run to see how they'd hang. I just used a rope attached to my fence, and thankfully they worked exactly as I had hoped. I do recommend doing all of this in the summer so you don't have to do all the grunt work in the cold and snow. I live in Minnesota, so that's an issue that may not be a problem where you live. Next came time to rig the sleigh. I kept with the same 1/8 IPS threaded pipe for this. I don't remember exactly, but I think they were 30-inch rods. It took some time to figure out the position of these. I wanted them to be at the same angle as the reindeer, but I also wanted to make sure that the pipe goes through a thicker part of the mold. I ended up going right under the back rail and right under the front rail where the plastic is just a little bit thicker. I didn't show it here, but I put a nut and lock washer on each side of the pipe inside the sleigh to keep them from shifting back and forth. This is the piece I fabricated to attach the lines to the trees. This is 1-inch square tubing with holes in it every 1 inch. I got this at my local big box hardware store along with the pulley and the eye bolts with lock washers and nuts to keep them tight. I made these 10 inches wide, which is the width of the pipes in the deer with the rings on the end. I painted these black later on because they will actually live in the trees year-round. I attached these to the trees with 6-inch screws. You could also use lag bolts, but I prefer the screws just because it's easier and faster. It was tricky getting these level and facing each other on opposite sides of the trees, but it did come out all right. After these were in place, it was time for another test run, and everything went as planned. Next up was Rudolph. Obviously, these companies didn't make a specific Rudolph, so you need to alter one of your deer to make your own. I was a little nervous about cutting out the nose, but it ended up going well. I used a razor blade to cut off the main part, and then I used a Dremel to slowly make the hole bigger to accommodate the bulb. I opted to use a round candelabra bulb. This one is clear, but I ended up getting a white one and spray painting it red. If you do that, do many thin coats of paint instead of one heavy one. It'll give you much better coverage and there won't be any runs. For the lights in the body of the deer, I bought standard clip-in lights and I cut the cords short to, I believe, about 7 inches and used vampire plugs on the end. I was unhappy with the brightness of the C7 bulbs, so I found these at my local big box store, and they're super bright and are thin enough to fit in the holes. This is an upgrade I highly suggest. After getting all the deer laid out on the ground and ready to hung, it is time for the spacers. Now, these are perhaps the most important pieces of this entire rigging. I made these from 1/16 inch wire rope or airplane cable. I got these online along with the connecting pieces. You have to make these loops. It's not hard. There's plenty of YouTube things to figure that out. I don't remember exactly how long I made mine. I think they were 26 inches or so. It's totally up to each person depending upon how far apart you want your deer. But these are actually what are holding most of the weight from deer to deer from top to bottom. Once the spacers are on, it's time to get them up. For the support cables, I used 1/8 inch wire cable coated in red vinyl. I got the cable and all of the attachments online. There's plenty of places to get them. I cut 2 separate lengths, leaving way more than I needed. I attached them with carabiner clips that I got at the local big box store. These hold all of the weight, so make sure you get the ones rated for heavy weight. Now all you do is thread the red cable through all of the holes. This is pretty straightforward. When you get to the end of the deer, guide the wire through the pipes in the sleigh. Now, once you've passed through the sleigh, you can put on the U-clips and thimbles to finish off the end, which will be then connected to the turnbuckles, and I'll cover that in just a second. To connect all the lights, I made my own extension cord with SBT 1 wire and vampire outlets that I got online. I believe I spaced mine about 42 inches or so apart. I used little wire clips to attach them to the deer, and short cords on the bulbs just plugged right in. So now it's time to hoist everything up. I attached a carabiner clip to a rope that goes through the pulleys that I put up. I attached both of the red cables to the carabiner and pulled them up to meet the turnbuckles. After I tied it up to a cleat on the back of the trees, I attached the lines to the turnbuckles. Now I used 2 turnbuckles on each line to allow myself to get the lines extra tight. It also allows you to adjust the lines separately to make them even if one is higher or lower than the other. After releasing the red lines, I attached the carabiner to the guide line I attached to the sleigh on an eye bolt I put in the back. Here's a better look at the turnbuckles I used. Again, I got these at the local big box store. The importance of these is really mostly just getting everything on the same level. Now I head over to the other tree and attach the other carabiner to the guide line that I put on Rudolph. This is the line that basically holds up everything on the guidelines. The importance of this one is that this allows me to take these deer down after Christmas without having to climb up in the tree with 2 feet of snow on the ground. I pulled the rope so the carabiner is all the way up to the pulley. I made the guide wire to Rudolph a specific length to make sure it was the correct distance from the tree. Again, this will be different in every application. And that's it. The rope at each end keeps them taut from side to side to prevent them from slipping down the lines or pulling up. And this is how they look from inside the house. As you can see here, the spacing wires are really what support the weight from deer to deer. That allows the power cord to have some slack so there's no strain on the plugs. And here's the final product. Even though this was a ton of work up front, and I mean a ton of work, it will actually be really easy to hang these every year. Now I want to give a shout out to the guys at True Tone Bulbs for the LED C9 bulbs outlining the house. If you're not familiar with them, you absolutely should be. They're the only LED bulbs that accurately mimic the vintage incandescents. Now they didn't pay me to say that, and they didn't give me any free light bulbs, even though I'm sure they would love to. I just really love their product. If you like vintage Christmas and the warm glow of these old style lights, you really cannot go wrong with these, and there's nothing better on the market. Check them out at truetone.com and tell them John from Minnesota sent you. That's it from me. I hope this tutorial helped a lot of people. I know when I was starting out, I didn't even know where to begin. So hopefully this is a starting place for some people. Enjoy your decorating, and please have a very Merry Christmas.